Hey, what's up?
So yeah, do you want to tell us just a little bit about yourself? Like,
Yeah, sure. So I am, gosh, I don't even know where to start. I'm a fourth generation pastor. I'll start there.
oh,
Grown up in the church quite a bit. That was a lot of my upbringing. I have a background in sciences, so have an honors degree in biology, and I've kind of dabbled in a bunch of different areas. I'm very passionate about mental health, and so I've done lots of volunteer work, working with children with autism, working on phone lines, doing that kind of stuff. I was part of I don't know, like a missional community called the Unspoken Conversation. So we were all about shining the light on mental health and faith, that sort of thing. I've worked as a local church pastor, been a worship artist for years, writing songs and performing them, and I still lead worship at my local church. And most recently, I'm taking more of an entrepreneurial route. I'm really passionate about educating. Like I'm a teacher at heart, so I have a ministry right now to help people get free of sexual issues, specifically as they pertain to porn and masturbation.
mm-hmm.
And so I'm kind of using my science background, I'm using my psychology background, and obviously my pastoral experience, and sort of mixing it all together to create
Yeah,
programs and content that is going to help people get free, because it's a big issue, big topic, and there's not enough people talking about it. So
yeah. Wow, that's a lot of things that you've just unpacked there, and I really love that you said you're using all of these experiences that you've had in the past, and it just goes to show or goes to tell everyone that's on this live that there's no experience that's ever wasted. Like
yeah,
God takes you through a path. You might not know why you're studying biology right now, because when are you ever going to get to use it? But you
yeah,
know what? You're going to use those experiences later. So, really, really fantastic. There's really, like you said, a lot going on in when we're talking about sex and sexual issues and sexual and mental health and like all these other things. And then when you now bring it to the church, it almost seems like we don't talk about it enough, or we are not well educated or well informed about it. So,
yeah.
guys, if you're here, you're in the right place. We are talking about the S series. So you know what? I'm going to add it later when Sathiya's talking. We're talking about, so this is the first S, sex, in the S series, and today we're going to be focusing more about on masturbation and pornography and sexual sins or issues that people struggle with and how to break free out of it. So sex is such a big topic. Like,
Yeah.
why is it so good yet so bad? Like, what do you think, Sathiya? Tell
I
us.
don't, I mean, it's kind of weird, isn't it? Like, it's because things change with time. Like when you're young, it can be a very taboo topic, and most parents generally subscribe to like the don't talk about it, don't play with those parts of your body, don't do like whatever. It's a lot of don'ts. So we
Mm-hmm.
learn at a pretty young age that there's something about it that's not, it's not the same as other things, the other normal elements of life. And so that kind of creates a little bit of a disconnect in just our understanding of it. But obviously, as you get older, you get more choice, you get more opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
and you get to explore those things. And then that's when the rubber really hits the road. And sometimes people make good decisions, sometimes they make bad ones. And I think we're all trying to figure out, like, yeah, what does it actually mean, like, and what's appropriate about this topic and what's not. And
Mm-hmm.
context is a huge part of it. Obviously, like I'm talking about age, but there's so many other elements. So yeah, it's one of those weird things. It's just a mix. It's a mixed pot.
Yeah, for sure. Like
Yeah.
it's like over the years things just keep changing, or they're going to continue to change. And
Yes.
then it's like with each change we try to figure out how to respond
Yeah.
to this. So you're so right, like and most people also, like if you're from like the African descent or like more those cultures that have like a lot of culture and traditions,
Yeah.
there's that, like, you don't talk about it at home. Like people
No.
don't tell you, like, it's like you just kind of see mommy and daddy, or you just kind of stumble upon it. So for myself, for example, nobody had that conversation with me.
Okay.
I just whatever I learned on TV.
Yeah.
Right? So whatever other people were doing that seemed socially acceptable. And it
Yes.
seems like, if everybody's doing it, it must be right, right? So thanks for
Yes.
everyone for joining us. To the people that are just joining us, we're talking about sex, more importantly, masturbation, pornography, and sexual issues. So what do you think? So we've talked about why is sex so good, yes, so yet so bad. What do you think the purpose of sex is? Like, what's the big idea with it anyways? Like, you hear in church we're being taught like, oh, don't have sex until marriage.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's like, what's all this big deal? It's like, even when people have like, when they fall into sexual sins, for some reason, it seems to be badder than like lying, if that's even a word. What's the
Yeah.
big idea? What's the purpose of sex? And why all the restrictions?
Yeah, it's a good question. Okay, so I'm going to comment on the thing you said earlier because I think it's quite interesting, and then I will answer your question. But our generation, like especially millennials, in the church, statistically even, it's been shown, we've been quite rebellious against a lot of the sexual restrictions that our parents tried to put on us.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, we're kind of like okay, they tell us don't do this, we're going to go do it. Like as soon as we have freedom, we go and we try everything. Interestingly enough, Gen Z, so the generation after us,
Mm-hmm.
they're less sexually promiscuous than we are. And so
Really?
yeah, yeah, isn't that surprising? They're better with their money. They care more about the mission than having like a good salary in their jobs and careers, and they're less
Okay, I can see that.
promiscuous. And so it's very interesting to see how even from generation to generation, there's a response. Like everyone tries to grow on what the people have done before them. So we're kind of sandwiched in the middle because I think our parents were so strong about the topics, and it's kind of this weird subject to discuss because it was so taboo for us, but now we know like we're a very sexualized culture.
Mm,
Um, and so I think the thing for me, the thing that puts sex in its context or in its place for me is two ideas. I say that relationship stands on two legs: intimacy and commitment. Intimacy and commitment. So when it comes to romantic relationships, it should always be defined by these two parameters. In other words,
okay.
the level of intimacy that you experience should be dictated by the level of commitment you have to that person. And if you think
Wait,
about it
wait,
as,
wait.
yeah,
The level of intimacy that you.
experience with another person, it should be
Mhm.
based on the level of commitment you have to each other.
We need to tweet that, guys. Like, we need to tweet that. Okay, continue.
So the reason is because if you think of it like actually two legs, it needs both of them need to be an equal measure to balance each other out. If you have a level of intimacy that exceeds the level of commitment in the relationship becomes unstable. And that's why you see people that get so frustrated with like a one night stand, for example,
Hmm.
because it's a deep level of intimacy that far exceeds the level of commitment in the relationship. So where sex actually falls into place is sex is the greatest form of intimacy that two people can experience. It's physical, it's emotional, it's mental, it's spiritual. And the greatest form of intimacy demands the greatest form of commitment. And the
Mm,
greatest form of commitment you can make to another person is a covenant, and that's what we know as marriage. And so that's why sex is reserved for marriage. It's not meant to be restrictive. It's
mm,
meant to be that you experience something so profoundly intimate in an environment that's actually safe and that actually sets you up long term. And biologically, you have chemicals and hormones that get released in your body when you experience anything sexual that are affiliated with long term relationship. So the nature of our body chemistry even actually releases things that prepare us for long term relationship because we've had that kind of intimate bond between another person. And that's why a one night stand is actually not gratifying at all. It might be in the moment, but
mm.
the next morning something doesn't feel right, and it's because we violated this dynamic between intimacy and commitment.
Oh, wow. That's a lot to unpack right there. Like, for me, the level of intimacy you have with a person should be based on the level of commitment from that person. And the greatest commitment you can get from a person is marriage.
Yeah, it's a covenant. Yeah.
Yeah, a covenant. Okay, guys, if you did not get that, don't worry. I would share it with you guys later and you can tweet it or reshare it. So then, since marriage is such a big topic and obviously so important, we cannot afford to just dilly-dally about it. At what
Yeah.
age do you think the topic should be introduced? And who should introduce it?
Yeah, that's a really hard question to answer because um for starters, there's no such thing as the right age. That's kind of a myth because everybody develops differently. Um, and the kind of conversation you have with someone who's, let's say, under the age of 5 about the topic is going to be different than the kind of conversation you have even when they're 6 or 7. Like, the
Mm.
development changes quite rapidly. So you have to be quite discerning. But there's this principle in, especially if you study like scripture or any kind of historical text, there's this principle called the law of first mention. And the law basically is that whatever you hear, the first thing you hear on a subject becomes your measuring stick for everything else you hear afterwards.
Mm.
So it's important, it's a good idea for parents to be that first voice on the topic so that everything else the child hears actually gets compared to what the parents have said. If the first thing you learn about sex is through media or through really any other means, as a parent, you don't have as much control over the message that they receive. But that law of first mention says that they're probably going to compare everything, including the things you say as a parent, to what they saw on TV, what they heard from their friends, et cetera, et cetera. So you definitely want to be more proactive about it. And I think the other thing that's important to keep in mind when you talk to young people in general is you want to break as much of the stigma and the shame down about it. Even if you start to kind of quiet your voice when you talk about certain parts or that kind of thing, it communicates that there's something weird about it. But if you can actually just keep your cool as you talk about it and you mention the body parts or whatever it is, it creates safety. It just lets them know, okay, I can actually talk about this openly and it's okay.
Mm.
And that's a much healthier dynamic that I think any parent would want with their kid, because ultimately parents want their kids to come to them and talk to them about it,
For
but the
sure.
kids have to have safe experiences early on, even just when they're dabbling in the subject, to know that they can talk about them for the deeper things later on.
Yeah, for sure. And you're totally right about that. I think, a lot of times parents like just try to apply that firefighter approach. So it's
Yeah,
like you haven't built that relationship for, your child to be comfortable talking about the weirdest things, like, or just things you consider weird, or like, oh my gosh, we don't talk about that. So, we have to be able to build that bridge, or begin to create that bridge from the very beginning, just
yeah,
in the way you talk to them about, hey, it's not nice to talk to people like that the same way. And also when there are issues going on, like maybe social issues that you're hearing about, like let's say for example there's been a lot of like you know ladies coming out and saying that hey, they were sexually assaulted. I think it's really important to have that conversation also with your
yeah,
kid and say, what do you think about it?
yeah,
Right,
yeah.
so that way you're able to understand where they're at, and if they're not in the right spot, you can build that the bridge you've already built. You can walk on that bridge to bring them to where they need to be.
E-
So
yeah.
I'm just gonna read something Cornelia said here. Hey guys, so for those that are just joining us, we talk about sex, masturbation, pornography, sexual issues. We're just kind of starting off from the beginning on how, why sex is so good yet so bad, the purpose of sex, and when you should introduce it to your child. So Cornelia said a really great thing. It's funny because I taught my daughter about her body parts and called them exactly what they are. Yes, that's really true, right?
Good.
Because sometimes like people will say, "Oh, your pee pee." No. Like your
Yeah.
penis, your vagina, like there are words. Like I think also like you said, we should make sure we shouldn't associate it with shame, because when you say your vagina, then a kid is thinking, okay, well, that's not a good word, right? So I'm
Yeah.
glad you really mentioned that, Sathiya. So Sathiya, so now moving on into the shame that kind of comes across when we talk about sex, or sometimes when I remember growing up, and even sometimes I still find myself doing it. So we're watching TV like with your family, and then a sex scene comes up, and then you pretend to be like doing other things, like when your parents are not,
Be cool,
when
be
your
cool,
parents
be
are
cool.
there. Yeah, you pretend to be like, oh, yeah, you're just asking about random things as if like you don't know what's going on, right? So
Yeah,
that being said, things like that make us to turn to other things like pornography, masturbation, and now like pornography is just right there in your face. You don't even have to work too hard to go find it,
no,
right? You don't have to do too much. It's like in regular TV shows that you love so much, they just have it in there, right?
yeah,
What do you think, like from your experience? I know like you had like personal experiences with this, right? What are
yeah.
some of the reasons people dabble into this? Like do people just slide into it unknowingly? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's not too different than why somebody resorts to alcohol or drugs or anything like that in a destructive way. It's usually at the very core of it, it is meeting a need.
Hmm.
So the difference between somebody who can just have a social drink and somebody who drinks excessively and cannot stop is the one person's drinking socially and the alcohol doesn't have any attachment to them. There's no emotional or mental need that gets met. The person who cannot stop themselves and has to have X number of drinks every night, it's because it's medicating pain, it's meeting a need of feeling like somebody that they're not, or whatever it is. So porn is not that different. I mean, some people use porn very lightly, and it doesn't have that kind of emotional grip. My work is with people who are addicted, or people where porn is actually meeting a need in their life in a very, very destructive way. And I do believe all porn is destructive. I don't think there's really a place for it. I certainly haven't found it, because I believe in the sanctity of a relationship where
Hmm.
it's like I've committed myself to another person, and that's where I'm going to explore my sexuality. I don't want to do it on the screen or with anybody else. I'm not letting anybody else in. But when porn becomes really problematic is when it starts to meet emotional needs in somebody's
Hmm.
life. And I mean, I've had a bunch of issues I've had to get over in my life. I used to drink quite a bit more. I use that as an example. I used to have really bad language as well. I just didn't care as much when I was younger. And I did struggle with porn and masturbation. And when I really decided, like, okay, Sathiya, you're mid-20s, I think you need to get your life together. It was actually pretty easy to drink a little more responsibly. It was easy to use clean language, and I could not shake porn for the life of me. So
Hmm.
there was a difference in those three things. Those other two things weren't meeting needs at a deep level the way that porn was. And so that's when it becomes
Hmm.
very problematic, and you really need to get some help if you want to get free of it. Does that make sense? Did I
Well,
answer your
that's,
question?
yeah, for sure. I think,
Yep.
a lot of times before we can get on that path to recovery, we need to be able to identify, number one, how much of a hold does this have on me, and why? Like, what is it doing exactly? What is it doing exactly? If you're
Yeah.
seeing that you're not able to shake some things free, so like you said, with drinking and using foul language, you just made up your mind and you just went. But there's some situations, or there's some things. The Bible talks about the weights that so easily beset us, right? They've just become such a stronghold in your life, and you're trying, but you just can't get ahead of it for the life of
Yeah.
you. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So then you touched on something so important. You talked about how, porn is just, you haven't seen, even though people have different exposures to it and they use it differently, even if you're still like maybe once a week, you're using it, it still doesn't benefit. There isn't any benefit to it. Is that what you said, that
Yeah.
like
I
there's
don't
no
think so.
good that
Yeah.
comes out of it?
Yeah.
So
I
what would
mean,
you tell somebody that's just like, well, it's not really a big deal. Like, I can stop if I want, especially
yeah,
as a Christian.
yeah,
What
I mean,
would you advise?
those are the famous words of anybody with a problem is I can stop when I want. I mean, the thing you really want to ask is what purpose is it serving? Like we've all been called, whether you're a Christian or not, we've all been called to live meaningful lives and to
Mhm.
be intentional with our lives, with the things we do. And so I think for me, that's always the deeper question is, okay, like if you think porn's all right, like a little bit here and there, why? Like, what does it do for you?
Hmm.
Is that the best way for you to accomplish that thing that it does for you? And in my experience, like there's always a superior answer to porn. So I just that's why for me, like I don't see any value of it. And like I said, like for example, obviously I'm a married man, so I just can't imagine bringing something else like that into our marriage because we love each other and we love expressing ourselves with each other. We don't need anything else. Those other things, whatever purpose they could serve, we can find a better way to serve that purpose between the two of us.
Hmm.
So I think that's the thing you always want to ask. And it actually, that concept, it translates to the person who is addicted or who really has a problem because the way I say it is all behavior is rooted in belief. So
All
if you have
behavior is rooted in belief. Say that again for the people at the back.
yeah, yeah, all behavior is rooted in belief. So if you have a problematic behavior, it is actually the symptom of a belief issue. There's something beneath the surface that is troubled, that's fragmented, that needs some healing and repair. And a lot of people try to confront behavioral issues by changing the behavior instead of addressing the underlying beliefs. And if you actually resolve the belief issues, the things underneath the surface, the behaviors take care of themselves. So that's why paying attention to like what purpose is porn serving in your life,
Mm.
that's the kind of question you ask to get underneath the surface to figure out what is actually going on here, and then hopefully that gives you insights into better ways to satisfy those needs, those desires, whatever it might be that you have going on inside.
For sure. Thanks for saying that. And I think it's really interesting you mentioned that all behavior is rooted in belief, right? And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people try to address the behaviors rather than the belief. So, and it just brings me to the parallel of like you can see, and this is just for everyone. Look, see the behavior as the fruits and the belief as the root.
Yes.
So, for as long as you don't uproot a tree, it's gonna bear fruits.
Yeah, that's good. Exactly.
Right? It's going to bear fruit. So you have to always think about that. So then now I think I want to talk about, I know a lot of people, we sometimes think pornography or sexual sins, like, having sex out of marriage, is a single person problem. Like sexual sins, pornography is a single person problem. Could you, like, is that true? If it's not
No.
true, why is that?
Yeah, yeah.
Because some people would say, well, what? Maybe I should get married because the Bible did say, if you can't, it's better to get married than to burn with lust. So
True.
let me get married. A lot of Christians use that as a crutch or as a reason or for why they should marry, right? And a lot of
Yeah.
people have married on that premise. So what would you say to people like that? How can we help
Oh
educate?
man, that's a loaded question, Tolu. Okay, here's what I would say. Marriage is a magnifier.
Say that again for the people at the back.
Marriage is a magnifier. It's
Hmm.
not a problem solver, it's a magnifier.
Hmm.
So any issues you have before marriage will be on a larger scale because the scales are bigger when you're in a committed relationship. So your personal issues are now on display for another person that you deeply care about to see. And the best thing you can do if you're single is deal with your stuff, man. Like get rid of it as quickly as you can, and actually resolve it. Like again, don't just try to modify behavior. Fix your problems. Get the help you need.
Hmm.
Work on becoming a better person, so that you don't bring any of that stuff into marriage. And my wife and I both were actually on those journeys kind of in parallel, not realizing it. And when we met, we were so grateful that we had resolved some of these issues personally that we had because yeah, it's been easier for us in marriage. And we're still in our first year. We don't have any of this marriage stuff figured out yet. We're
Hmm.
rookies.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing to understand. And I do think like the thing is if you can learn to manage your sex drive before you're single, you will have a great sex life when you're married. So
Hmm.
those skills again, they transfer into the next season, and they actually serve you if you can develop them apart from yeah, sexual relationship in the confines of marriage.
Mm-hmm, for sure. Thank you so much for that. So yeah, marriage or sorry, pornography or sexual sins or sexual issues of, being in not being disciplined with your sexual drive. It's not a with your sex drive. It's not a single person problem. So if you're on here and you've been taught that, because I know a lot of times, like in churches, when we're praying for our singles, for some reason we always pray that, oh, our singles will not fall into sexual sins. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like, how about the married people? So yeah, that's definitely like a big thing. One thing also, Sathiya, I'm really glad that you are a gentleman and you're here talking about sex. I think for the longest time there's been, again, also because of culture, traditions, and we've just kind of passed it over from generation to generation, there's been this narrative that the female is the one responsible for keeping her cookies or cookie jar locked up, and being set, like the female is the one responsible for sexual purity, especially also in a relationship. You find
Yeah.
that when the girl gets pregnant, like she's demonized even worse than the guy. And
Yeah.
or moms will say, oh, boys will be boys, but then they don't have the same standard for their girls. What would you say to those parents, and also to just us as young adults, understanding that we're going to have marriages someday, we're going to have children someday, to just make sure that we don't repeat that negative cycle?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. The Some of the stigmas and stereotypes are beyond the individual. They're cultural. They're kind of woven into. I mean, even some of the elements of the education system purport the message a little bit. They're getting a lot better, but um, it's really really difficult. My encouragement to women is, number one, you got to find people who are going to get in your corner, because you will face that kind of stuff, especially if you are a single mom, or if you've been through that kind of stuff. Um, Unfortunately, it's a reality, and it's better to ask yourself, how can I cope with the reality that some people will not understand, some people will judge,
Mm.
than to get upset or really angered over it. Um, I always encourage them, like, find people who are going to support you and encourage you and remind you that actually you're just as valuable as the next. But for me as a guy, I consider it my responsibility to raise up men, like to
Mm-hmm.
help men to be men, because relationship is a two-way street. Sex is a two-way street, and we both have involvement in it, and we have to take ownership of that. And until people man up, until men man up, our society is going to continue to deal with some of these problems, because we're like one of the I think we're actually the most fatherless generation ever on planet Earth, because men are not owning up to their stuff. They're running away when things get difficult, and we're raising fatherless kids. And fatherless kids, statistically, they get into more trouble, and it obviously impacts society. And it's not just their fault. It's actually it's the dynamic of living without a father, of living in that kind of brokenness. So
Mm.
yeah, so I consider it my responsibility to raise guys who are going to be men. I'll give you this is actually, these are two great examples, because I've just spoken with a couple guys who fall into the two different categories, even in the last week. So spoke with one guy who's quite a bit older. He'd be in his 50s, 60s, has a problem with porn, looking to get some help, and he has not been faithful in his marriage.
Mm.
So he's got a whole plethora of issues. And on the phone, he's basically telling me, like, I know I messed up. This has been a long, long, long problem in my life, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to be free of it. I know I got to own my problem. That's the kind of guy you want to work with. The kind of guy who says,
Mm.
okay, I messed up, but I'm going to do whatever I can to resolve it. Now, let me contrast that with another guy. I got on a call with him this week. He was interested in my program, and he's talking about how he's struggling. He's not feeling super attracted to his wife in his marriage. His wife is like, put on a bit of weight here and there, and whatever, whatever. And all he's talking about, like when he's talking through kind of the solutions and how he needs to get free, all of it revolved around his wife's weight. So he's kind of
Mm.
like, I just know that if my wife would, like, stay true to the program that she's on, like, I'd be more attracted to her, and I wouldn't be going to porn and that kind of stuff. So he's being completely irresponsible, because he's
Mm.
not taking any ownership for his own emotions, his own attraction, and his own decisions. And those are the kinds of, like, dynamics that us as men, we need to nip in the bud, like, ASAP.
Yeah.
Like, we're already way too late on this, because those kinds of mentalities are wreaking havoc on our society, and he's going to struggle in his marriage as long as he keeps handling his problems that way. His marriage is always going to be a tension. He will always find something to blame for his own problems.
Yeah, for sure. And it's really interesting. So I think also as Christians, we always have to remember that the Bible calls us to do everything out of love, right?
Yeah.
And love means esteeming the other person. Love means you handling your stuff, like you being honest and open with yourself and say, you know what, a situation happened. How did I contribute to it? Like you said, marriage is a two-way, it takes two. Any relationship takes two. So
Yeah.
you always have to first look at yourself. What can I do? Let's start from me. And then I remember even the scripture talks about, if like an unbelieving person marries a believing person, if they're walking in their faith and just walking faith with actions, walking the way God has called them, their actions, their character can actually make the other person change.
Yeah.
Right? So we always have to be responsible, take responsibility for our actions or things, like figure out ways how you could do better. Right?
Yes.
So definitely looking at that. Okay, so I'm gonna just segue a little bit. Let's talk about, I just remember the conversation I had with somebody, and I don't know, we were just talking about sex toys.
Okay.
And then and then they were like, oh wow, like there's so much like technology, like, you know, technology has really gone, like even in the sex toy industry. I'm like, well,
Oh yeah.
I'm not shocked, right? And then they were saying how so I think we're just having a conversation about back and forth about introducing or having sex toys in your marriage. And I was just like, but what's a sex toy gonna do that me and my spouse can't do really well? Right?
Yeah.
But they didn't agree. So what do you think? Like, how can we help ourselves to understand, okay, we've agreed that, okay, pornography is just not something we need to bring in. Masturbation is just not. But sex toys, just we're both using it between the both of us. Like, I hear there's some really groundbreaking technology, especially if you're in a long distance relationship. Why should or should you not bring sex toys into your relationship, into your marriage? What do you think?
Um, I think it's one of those topics that's it's actually similar to masturbation for me in the sense that the Bible actually doesn't expressly talk about it. So we
Mm-hmm.
don't have super clear instruction biblically. Um, my challenge about masturbation is always like, why are you doing it? So, and can you, and then the other thing, especially for guys, is can you do it without fantasy? And
Mm.
so I would have similar questions for sex toys, but I'm actually whereas masturbation, I don't know anyone who can really do it in good conscience. Sex toys, I actually think there could be a place, but again, you want to relentlessly check your motives and
Mm.
just ask yourself, like, is this enhancing the experience and the intimacy that we're experiencing, or is it taking away from it? So I think those are the questions that you want to ask.
So one thing I remember I noted to the person was, the reason why I personally think it's a bad idea is
Hmm.
that it could actually sabotage your relationship, I feel like, because if you begin to enjoy the sex toy better than your actual person that you should be engaging in a really nice sexual relationship with, as God has called you guys to be, right?
Yeah.
So that's for me personally, like I would say no to it, but anyways.
Well, 100%, no, 100%. And I'll just say that that's the way to look at it. You always want to make sure the priorities stay in place. And that, again, like, there's nothing biblical against those kinds of things.
Mhm.
But it's not permission to just have free reign either. You have to make sure that the main things remain the main things.
Yeah, for sure. So to the people that are listening to us, I'm actually curious to hear your thoughts on it. So please, like, comment
Yeah,
and just let
yeah.
us know what you think. What are your thoughts around it? If you haven't quite figured it out, that's cool too. Let us know. Okay, so now let's talk about, I know you mentioned how you had to go through your own process to just kind of break free from this, and even with your wife right now, she also like was going through that and you guys didn't know.
Mhm.
So what's the first step? Like, so to somebody maybe battling this and they've admitted that, hey, you know what, this is a problem. I need to get ahead of this. What Where should they begin?
Yeah, I mean, um, I think the biggest thing is probably acknowledging your issue and talking to somebody about it. That for sure is always a good place to start. It always depends on the depth of your issue. So if it's something that's occasionally becoming a problem in your life, sorry, that's occasionally a problem in your life, talk to your pastors, talk to your mentors, your leaders, or your close friends. Just find places where you can talk openly about it. Um, I think the other thing is if it's more of an issue where it's like a regular thing, then my biggest encouragement is reach out and get professional help. Like find somebody who actually has a system, who has been there before, who can actually help you on your journey, so that you don't have to kind of guess what the solutions are and fumble your way through. So that's my biggest encouragement. I think the thing that we all need in this journey called life is we need outlets. We just need
Mm.
safe people that we can talk to, that we
Yeah.
can be transparent with. And I know for me, the outlets that I've cultivated in my life, they're not just to preserve my sexual purity. They're good for my mental health. They're good for my emotional well-being. They give me perspective sometimes on my career issues or my leadership. And so those kinds of outlets are really valuable for several facets of your life, and sexual purity is included in all of that.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm really glad you said that. Find an outlet. So again, it has to be an outlet that you can trust. Understand that it's not everyone that you
Yeah.
can talk to.
Yeah.
Not like somebody might be a really great spiritual leader or a great whoever. You also have to make sure that when you talk to them, you find yourself being open. Like you don't feel the need to hide, because then it defeats the whole purpose. Like you have to be naked and unashamed in the way you talk to the person. So that's really, really important. So then understanding that we're in this season, for somebody, let's say someone has maybe overcome this in the past, or it's still something they're actively working on.
Yeah.
Is it possible that people can still get tempted, like, to go back into it?
Yeah.
Especially now that, like, it seems like we have all this time in the world. We're
Yeah.
always online. We have access to like online content however you want it. Just search it. Um, what should they do? What should people like that do? Like, so number one, are you able to, is it possible that you might get tempted back again? And in the situations where you do feel like you want to engage in it again, what should one do?
Yeah. Okay. Great questions. So the first question, the short answer is yes. It will, you will be tempted again. I define freedom this way. Freedom is the power of choice. So a lot of people think freedom is the absence of regulation, or in this case, it's the absence of temptation.
Mm-hmm.
No, freedom is the power of choice. It means that in the face of a temptation, you choose against it. So remember that Jesus was tempted in every single way.
Mm-hmm.
So Jesus was a free man. He modeled perfect freedom on planet Earth, and yet he was still tempted. So we know that freedom is not the absence of temptation. True freedom is actually in the face of this temptation, I'm going to choose something else. So I still feel tempted from time to time. I've been free of porn and masturbation for over 4 years now. And yeah, on my bad days especially, that temptation is there. But what
Mm-hmm.
keeps me a free person is the choice I make in the face of it. So yeah, temptation is a normal part of it, and it makes you stronger. The more that you withstand temptation, you build immunity towards it, and it does make you a more powerful and a more free person. The second question is, yeah, there's actually a lot of people right now who have reached out to me who are struggling more, even just being cooped up during this outbreak. Like we're all in our homes and we don't have as many ways to stay busy or to just distract us or whatever. So a guy that just joined my program 2 weeks ago, he's a software engineer, and suddenly he's at home. He's at home 24/7. He's in his basement office,
Yeah.
and it hasn't been a problem for him before, and all of a sudden his mind is starting to wander there because he's bored and he's whatever else. And so yeah, it's a real thing right now. A lot of people are struggling, probably more than normal.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a couple things you can do. Is it okay if I talk about that a little
Oh
bit?
yeah, sure.
So the one thing you really want to fight for in this season is structure in your life. So for me, like I'm still waking up, I'm going through my morning routine. I have like a couple hours of routine in the morning before I start work. I'm doing all of that the same way I normally would. I'm working in my home office, but
Mhm.
I still get dressed every morning the way I normally would. And so I'm just keeping some of those things in place to just keep my day structured, to get myself in that mindset, because as soon as you start to take down some of your walls, that's usually where you can start to kind of drift a little bit and you end up in places you never intended to. So I think that's a huge one. And the other big thing is just finding connection. Like we all are wired for connection. And for me, I'm a big extrovert. So not being able
Mhm.
to connect with people in the same kind of volume that I'm accustomed to is driving me crazy.
Mhm.
And so it just means more phone calls, more Zoom calls, but you want to be as proactive about just taking good care of your heart, doing things that are going to be good for your heart, and trying to nip things in the bud. And if you have fallen more into temptation, if you've given in a little bit more, Be kind to yourself, not in like a tolerable way, like it's okay, like you're gonna figure it
Mm,
out. No, be very proactive about that and nip it in the bud before it becomes a worse thing. But just understand we're under unusual circumstances, and so we're exposed to unusual temptations. So we have to start safeguarding against the stuff in a new way. It's all new territory for all of us.
yeah, for sure. And I like that you said that, when you're kind with yourself, not in a, oh, hey, it's okay, and then gonna do it again, right? So I think part
Yeah,
of that is just when you have that person you can talk to, you're able to be accountable to
yeah,
them. And I think part of that is also like having that accountability person is that you of course respect them, you respect their opinion so much, that's why you have them as your accountability person. I think as human beings we don't want to disappoint also. So I think in the face of that struggle, when you actually think through and like, do I actually want to keep going back every day saying, hey, I fell again,
yeah,
right? Like when you actually think through those processes, like those things, it really keeps you in check. I know for me, when at first, like just with every other thing, I'm just applying this, like letting people see that it's not like the steps or the paths are not any different from every other thing that you struggle with, right? So let's say, for example, especially as a leader, when maybe I say, oh, we're going to do something, or I give my word on something, it's almost like because I lead these people, I can't be a hypocrite about it, because it's like, how do I go back and and be like, oh yeah, I
yeah,
did, or maybe I'm found in like, in some really shifty situation. Like how can I, defend this? And I think that's really what plays out also when we have such high expectations of like leaders. But I need us to bring that to ourselves and have
yes,
that same high expectations and accountability, require that accountability from yourself. So
yeah.
that's really good that you mentioned that. Somebody asked the question, is this something that stops or it takes a while? Like,
Oh, okay. Are they referring like to porn and that kind of
yeah,
stuff?
porn, sexual sins, pornography, does it just stop or does it just take, it takes a while? Or,
Yeah, I mean, if your issue is like rooted in something spiritual, like you're under some sort of oppression, then it can actually be a very quick solve. That's like 1% of the population. So generally speaking, yeah, it does take time. It's a progression,
mm-hmm,
and I actually tell my guys that relapse is part of recovery, because a lot of them on their journey at some point they stumble
mm,
and then they get so distraught and they're disappointed and they're like, oh, this whole thing's a sham, like I thought I
uh-huh,
was doing better but I'm not. And it's like, no, 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 remember, recovery is about resolving the root issues.
mm-hmm,
So all it is, I kind of use an example, like, they say water always goes to the place of least resistance, right? So
mm,
if you pour water on like on a foundation, if there's cracks, it will slip through the cracks, right? It goes to the lowest place. So sometimes what happens is when you're repairing your foundation, as you recover from an issue, there's still some cracks that you didn't know were there, or
yeah,
that you thought you patched up, but you didn't quite catch them. And
mm-hmm,
so they surface from time to time.
mm-hmm,
And when that happens, it's just an opportunity to stare that thing right in the face, figure it out, and then resolve it and move on.
yeah,
So yeah, it's a gradual progress, and I feel much more confident in the people who have gone through a journey and an actual process than those who just instantly got free. I'm much more cautious with those people, and usually it's only a matter of time before they have something else that they need to deal with.
yeah, for sure. And also one thing I want whoever asked that question, just everybody to remember is when you're engaging in like sexual sins, pornography, masturbation, it's become a habit, right? And I was actually reading this book a couple of years ago, The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, I think. And one key takeaway I took from that was that you cannot get rid of an habit. You have to replace it.
Yeah,
Like that, it just doesn't go away, right? So if it's becoming a habit, you have to replace it. And we understand that it takes about 21 to 40 days to develop to develop a habit or replace a habit. So it
yeah,
takes time for sure. With everything else, it takes time to grow up. It takes time to learn. It takes time
yeah,
to get to know God. It takes time to lose weight. It
yeah,
doesn't take as much time. It doesn't take as much time to gain it, but everything takes time, right? So
yeah.
just always remember that and just go through that process. Take it a day at a time.
Yeah, and if I could, I'll just jump on that real quick. Research is showing now it actually probably takes more like 63 days to really change a habit,
Hmm.
or so 9 weeks, because the first 21 days or so, it's you're kind of just deconstructing whatever habit you had before, and it's just a good reminder. We have to be really kind to ourselves in this process. It's going to take time, and it's not a perfect journey. You just want to make sure that you're heading upwards, like everything is trending upwards. And yeah, and as long as you're doing that, then you have every reason to applaud what you're doing and keep going. You know.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for that, Sathiya. So for those that are just joining us, we've had a really great conversation. We have maybe about 13 or whatever minutes yet left. If you have any question, so somebody said, celebrate every day that you are free. Don't focus on the bad days and beat yourself up. Yeah. And I really
Yeah,
love that.
exactly.
Like, I know, people that have gone through Alcoholics Anonymous, they have this chip that they use to just kind of remind themselves, like, of how far they've come. Right. So
Yeah,
don't always look at how far you have to go, because that can be very discouraging, but look
yeah,
at how far you've come. That's really helpful. So yeah, for those just joining us, I pinned the subject at the bottom there. I'm gonna have this on the IGTV for Manifest Hub, so you can rewatch and get all the gems again. There's some tweetable stuff in here, guys. Like, Sathiya has been dropping some gems. I had to just write it down real quick. Um, so if you have any questions or any thoughts or comments, like, totally drop them before, like, in the next 10 minutes before we finish. So just one final one for you, Sathiya.
yeah,
So understanding that, Manifest Hub is mostly for young adults. We do have, some older people on here that come on and just check out what's up. It's for young adults. Some are married, some are single. There's a mixed batch in here.
cool.
Um, and one of the big things in our lives as young adults that we pay attention to, that takes a big place in our life, is relationships, right? Um, Either again, marriage, like friendship, whatever. So how can someone help or support their maybe friend or partner? So let's say, for example, I already got into this relationship and all of a sudden I found out my um, partner, my spouse, my bae has, this issues with pornography. Or maybe they just opened up to me and just say, you know what, like, I'm dealing with this. How can I, as a person, help support them? Like, what can I do? What should I do? What should I not do to help support them through that journey to recovery?
Yeah, well, the biggest, so if you're just on a friend level, or well, let's say if you're outside of being a spouse, the thing you want to avoid is becoming their accountability partner. Where, and here's what I mean by that specifically is if you're an accountability partner where, they're just going to text you every time that they messed up. Hey, I messed up today. Pray for me, that kind of thing. Those kinds of systems are very popular and they're absolutely useless. So they don't help. They don't actually solve the problem. I've been part of those systems before, and the results are minimal. What you actually want is you want to find friendships or systems where you can be accountable for the temptations, the emotions, the thoughts, the things that actually lead up to the mistake.
Mm,
I actually say it's better to confess a temptation than to confess a mistake.
mm,
You'd rather nip things in the bud early on. So if you're going to engage with somebody in any deeper level beyond being just a confidant, you want to actually make sure that they're willing to be held accountable at a very early level in the process. It can't just be, hey, I messed up today, please pray for me. That doesn't do anything for anyone. Um,
mm,
if you're in a marriage, then it's basically the complete opposite. Don't be their accountability partner. It just doesn't work. Guys are wired differently than girls. So whether you're the girl struggling or the guy struggling, you need to get help from people who are probably of the same gender, and who
mm,
just don't have that kind of relationship with you, because it's much more tangled when you're
mm,
in a marriage. But I would say understand just two things. Number one, the best thing you can offer somebody who's struggling is safety. So
mm,
for them to just know that when they do talk to you about it, it's going to be safe. And I would say the second thing is make sure you get help for yourself as well, because there is an element of betrayal that most people experience when they find out their spouse has been engaging in that kind of activity. And if you don't resolve your part of it, that person could actually get free and you could still be resentful and bitter over the decisions they've made, or still feel hurt or not trust them or whatever. So just make sure you take care of your side of it as well, because it's the nature of a marriage is both
Mhm.
people are involved in every decision, even if the one person makes the decision on their own. So so you just want to make sure that you're looking after your heart that way as well, and that you're getting the
Yeah,
help you need to.
for sure. And I would like you to talk more a little bit about the situation where it's not a marriage. It's of course a committed relationship. Maybe you're even planning a marriage.
Yeah.
How does one determine if to kind of go ahead or maybe take a step back? Because you remember in the beginning or midway through our conversation, you talked about two different guys. One is saying, you know what, I have an issue, I need to fix it. The other one is saying, well, if she would just do this, if she would just do that. How does one recognize, like, especially if your spouse is, how do you know if your spouse is person A or person B? And how, not your spouse, your person that you're in a relationship with. And of course, you guys are considering marriage, right? You're considering, you know, that permanency that marriage brings. How do you decide if to continue or not?
Yeah. Wow. There's no right answer. I mean, everyone's going to be different. So I'm working with a guy right now who's supposed to get married this month. His fiance found out about his porn problem, and he had actually gone even further, and was like, kind of, he was just going to places that he shouldn't be, if I can put it that way. And when his fiance found out, she called it all off. But I know couples as well who have found out about that stuff in engagement, and they work through it and get married.
Mm,
So there's no right or wrong, but I would say on the other side of it, you're looking for responsibility and actual repentance. So repentance is not being sorry for yourself or sorry about what you've done. Repentance, that might be the first step, but repentance is actually, I'm going to do everything I can to change. The actual word, even in the Bible, for repentance means to change your thinking. It means that, okay, the way I'm looking at this is wrong. I acknowledge it, and I'm going to change my ways. It's not, I'm going to try. I'm really sorry that I did this. Those things are fine, but there has to be a component of, I'm going to actually change my ways.
mhm.
And it can't be, I'm going to wait until it blows through and I'm finally like, I'm not spending all this time at my desk anymore. It can't be, I'm going to wait until XYZ. It's, I'm going to change now because I know that I'm the issue and I'm going to be part of the solution. Are you there, totally? It might be my connection, but you're frozen right now. I think I lost you.
So all behavior is rooted in belief, right? So the belief is just more like, the thinking that you need to fix. So we have just 5 more minutes. If no one has anything else to say or any questions, again, if you have any questions, specific questions, or maybe you know somebody that's struggling or battling with this, you can of course reach Sathiya Sam at Sathiya Sathiya Sam on Instagram, and he has this program called Deep Clean. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, Sathiya? I think you talked about
Yeah,
it
for
in the
sure.
beginning, but maybe for the people that joined us later, what is Deep Clean?
Yeah. So Deep Clean is the program that I created out of my journey of struggling with porn. I struggled for 15 years, and most of those 15 years, I didn't know how to get free. And like I had mentioned earlier in our chat, I didn't really care about it that much. I always thought I'll just get free when I want to. And then when I wanted to, I couldn't do it. And the
Mm,
reason that I couldn't get free, in addition to obviously the roots were kind of deep and it was a long lasting habit, there just weren't resources out there to help people. So I didn't know the
mm,
first thing about how to get free. Even though I wanted it, I actually didn't know what to do. And that really created this frustration in me because I realized it was like this gaping hole in our society, especially in the church. And so while I was starting to get free, I had purpose in my heart that when I get free, I will do everything I can in my power to help other guys get free in a much shorter time than I did. Like 15 years is way too long to
yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah.
So that's what Deep Clean is. It's a comprehensive program. It's an online course, coaching, and then community all built into one, and it's designed to help guys really get to their root issues and resolve them quickly and effectively. And it's also there to build skills and tools that will help them stay free. And it's tools that they can apply every single day of their life if they want. And it's a bit of a longer program for the reason I told you earlier, which is that It does take about 63 days to break a
Mhm.
habit. So
Yeah.
deep clean is not a quick fix. It's an intensive, so that you kind of stay submerged in it for a longer period of time, and you can kind of work through the kinks and resolve the issues that come up maybe a little bit later that you missed at first or that sort of thing.
Mhm.
All while doing it in the safety of a community and obviously having guidance from me and some of my other coaches in place. So that's what deep clean is. People can find out more at my website, which
Yeah,
is
for sure.
sathiyasam.com, or my Instagram is actually Sathia Sam. I got my middle initials in there,
Oh, okay.
SathiaMe Sam on Instagram.
So we have 1 minute and 50 seconds left. Just
Yeah.
name one ministry that is catered towards women.
Oh, great question. Okay, there's actually a ministry called Secret Habit,
Mm.
and it's started by a couple, and both the husband and the wife had their own journeys with pornography, with sexual issues, and they now have offered themselves to help people. So the woman there, her name is Helena. She's a friend of mine. I don't know her as well as I know her husband Sean,
Mhm.
but they do incredible work, and she's got a really amazing story. So Secret Habit, that'd be my recommendation.
Awesome. And also there's one called G Spots Ministries. She's in Australia though, so I don't know how that would work with the North American audience or with the time, really wide time difference. But hey,
Sure.
listen, Sathiya, it's been amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for saying yes. I'm really excited for your ministry. I think I've known Sathiya since St. Catherine's days. It was first
Yeah.
your dad. In ministry, and then also just you guys just coming to Royal House and just ministering to us. So thank you so much for continuing to be a light. Thank you so much. I'm so excited for the men's ministry or this movement that you're building. Guys, if you want to, connect with Sathiya, I'm going to have him on Manifest Hub. Like his handles all over the place. Like just look for the post with his name on it. And yeah, so it's been amazing. 24 seconds left. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks, Sathiya, for joining us. And I'll see you guys. The second S word is next week, Saturday, submission. It's going to be fantastic. All right, talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.